At 62, she thought her life was finally settling down, until she inherited something no one wanted, inherited Grandpa's cave. Hidden deep in the desert, the cave seemed worthless at first, just an empty piece of land tied to a man everyone believed had abandoned his family. But when she stepped inside inherited Grandpa's cave, she uncovered documents, secrets, and a hidden truth buried for decades, something powerful enough to put her life in danger. Subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Let's get started. Margaret Ellis had spent 4 decades chasing stories no one else dared to tell. At 62, newly retired and emotionally drained from a lifetime in investigative journalism, she returned to the quiet desert town of Silver Ridge, Arizona, a place she once swore she'd never come back to. The air was dry, the silence heavy, and the past lingered like dust on forgotten memories. Her grandfather, Thomas Ellis, had always been a mystery. The family spoke of him in hushed tones, distant, cold, and strangely absent even when he was alive. When he passed, Margaret expected nothing. No inheritance, no closure. Just another unanswered chapter. But then came the letter. A legal notice informed her she had inherited a remote piece of land, miles outside town, with a single note attached: inherited Grandpa's cave. A cave? That was it? No house. No money. Just a cave buried in the desert hills. Frustrated but curious, Margaret decided to see it for herself before selling it off. She told herself it was just routine, one last loose end before moving on with her life. But deep down, something unsettled her. Because for the first time in years, a story was calling her back. And this one felt personal. Margaret had expected disappointment. Maybe even regret. But she hadn't expected silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears. The drive to the cave took nearly 2 hours from Silver Ridge. The paved road slowly gave way to gravel, then dirt, then something that barely qualified as a path. Her old sedan struggled with every mile, dust clouds trailing behind her like ghosts refusing to let go. When she finally stopped, there was nothing. No signs. No buildings. Just endless desert stretching under a pale, unforgiving sky. "This is it?" she muttered, stepping out of the car. The wind whispered through dry brush, carrying heat and something else. Something ancient. She grabbed the worn map from the passenger seat, the one attached to the inheritance papers. A crude sketch, hand-drawn, with a small X marked near a rocky ridge. It didn't look official. It looked personal. Margaret followed it on foot, her boots crunching against gravel as the sun dipped lower. Each step felt heavier, not from the heat, but from a growing sense that she was walking into something she didn't understand. Then she saw it. A narrow opening carved into the side of a massive rock formation. Not dramatic. Not grand. Just there. Quiet. Waiting. The entrance to inherited Grandpa's cave. She stood frozen for a moment. "This is ridiculous," she whispered. A lifetime of logic told her to turn around. Sell the land. Forget this ever existed. But another voice, older, deeper, pushed her forward. Margaret switched on her flashlight and stepped inside. The temperature dropped instantly. Cool air wrapped around her like a second skin, carrying the faint scent of stone and time. Her footsteps echoed softly as the entrance tunnel narrowed, forcing her to move carefully. "This better be worth something," she murmured. But as she walked deeper, something changed. The walls. They weren't natural. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but the more she looked, the clearer it became. Sections of the cave had been shaped, smoothed, deliberate. Someone had worked here. Her heartbeat quickened. "Grandpa, what were you hiding?" The tunnel opened into a wider chamber, and Margaret stopped cold. In the center of the room stood a wooden table. Not rotted. Not broken. Preserved. On it sat a small metal box. Her breath caught. No way. This wasn't just a cave. This was a place someone had used. Lived in. Worked in. Waited in. Margaret approached slowly, each step cautious, as if the past itself might shatter under her weight. The beam of her flashlight trembled slightly in her hand. The box was old, military style, scratched and worn, but locked. And then she noticed something that made her pulse spike. A key. Hanging from a nail on the wall beside it. Who leaves a key? Right next to a locked box? Unless it was meant to be found. Her fingers hesitated as she reached for it. This is insane, she whispered again. But she was already committed. The key slid into the lock with a soft click. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, she turned it. The sound echoed louder than it should have, bouncing off the cave walls like a signal. Margaret slowly lifted the lid. Inside were not valuables. No gold. No cash. Just documents. Stacks of them. Carefully preserved. Her journalistic instincts ignited instantly. She picked one up, flipping it open. Names. Dates. Locations. Transactions. Her breath hitched. This wasn't random. This was evidence. Detailed records, spanning decades. And every page pointed to something far bigger than a family secret. Something dangerous. Something buried. Margaret's hands began to shake, not from fear, but from recognition. She had seen patterns like this before. In corruption cases. In criminal investigations. In stories that powerful people tried to erase. Her grandfather wasn't just hiding. He was documenting. Exposing. And suddenly, everything shifted. This wasn't an inheritance. It was a responsibility. A story that had waited years, maybe decades, for someone brave enough to uncover it. Margaret looked around the cave, her chest tightening. What did you get yourself into? But deep down, she already knew the truth. This cave was never meant to be sold. It was meant to be opened. And now, she was the one who had opened it. Margaret didn't realize how deep she was in, until the cave answered back. She had barely finished scanning the first few pages when a sharp sound echoed through the chamber. A rock shifted. She froze. The cave went silent again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt watched. Margaret slowly turned, sweeping her flashlight across the walls. Nothing. Just stone, shadows, and the same stillness. Get a grip, she muttered under her breath. But her instincts, honed over decades of investigative work, were screaming. She wasn't alone. Then, a beam of light cut through the darkness from behind her. Not hers. Someone else's. Margaret spun around, heart pounding. At the entrance of the chamber stood a man. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Mid-50s. His face was partially hidden in shadow, but his presence filled the space like a warning. Well, he said calmly, his voice echoing off the stone. Looks like someone finally found it. Margaret's grip tightened on the document in her hand. Who are you? The man stepped closer, his boots crunching softly against gravel. Name's Victor Hale, he replied. And you're standing on something that doesn't belong to you. Her eyes narrowed. Actually, it does. I inherited this property. Victor let out a low chuckle. Not amused, just certain. Inherited, he repeated. That's one way to put it. Margaret felt a chill crawl up her spine. You've been watching this place, she said, more statement than question. For a long time. How long? Victor didn't answer immediately. Instead, his gaze drifted to the metal box, still open on the table. You shouldn't have opened that, he said quietly. Margaret stepped back, placing herself between him and the documents. Why? She challenged. Because it exposes something? His expression shifted, just slightly, but enough. She had hit something real. You have no idea what you're holding, Victor said, his voice lower now. Those papers. They're not just records. They're leverage. Power. The kind that people kill for. Margaret's pulse quickened. That's exactly why they shouldn't stay buried. Victor's jaw tightened. You think you're the first person to try and do the right thing? He snapped. Your grandfather thought the same thing. The words hit like a punch. What do you mean? She demanded. For a moment, Victor hesitated. Then he exhaled slowly, as if deciding how much to reveal. Thomas Ellis wasn't just hiding, he said. He was being hunted. Margaret felt the ground shift beneath her. Hunted? By who? Victor looked directly at her now, no shadows, no distance. By people who built their lives on the secrets in that box. Silence filled the cave again, but now it was heavy with truth. Margaret's mind raced. All these years. Everyone thought he disappeared. That he didn't care. Victor shook his head. No. He cared too much. Her throat tightened. So what happened to him? Victor's expression hardened. He got close. Too close. Started putting the pieces together, names, deals, evidence. He was going to expose everything. Margaret glanced down at the documents in her hands. And that's why he hid them here. Yes, Victor said. Because this cave. No one knew it existed. Not officially. Not on any map. A realization dawned. Except you. Victor didn't deny it. I used to work with him, he admitted. A long time ago. Before things got complicated. Margaret studied him carefully. Then why are you here now? His answer came without hesitation. To stop you from making the same mistake. The air between them tightened. Margaret took a slow step forward. My grandfather didn't hide this so it would stay buried forever, she said firmly. He left it to me. Victor's eyes flashed. No, he said. He left it because he ran out of time. That landed harder than anything else. For a split second, doubt crept in. What if this wasn't a gift? What if it was a warning? Then, a distant rumble echoed from outside the cave. Both of them turned. Engines. More than one. Victor's face changed instantly. They're here. Margaret's stomach dropped. Who? But she already knew the answer. The people Victor had been talking about. The ones who would kill for what was in that box. Victor grabbed his flashlight, his voice sharp now. If you want to live, you need to listen to me. Margaret hesitated, just for a moment. Then the sound of car doors slamming echoed into the cave. Too late to turn back. Too late to pretend this wasn't real. She looked at the documents, then at Victor. Her life as she knew it was over. What do we do? She asked. Victor met her eyes. We don't let them get what your grandfather died protecting. And just like that. The story wasn't about the past anymore. It had become a fight for survival. The sound of engines outside grew louder. Closer. Margaret's heart pounded, not with fear this time, but with something sharper. Clarity. For the first time since stepping into inherited Grandpa's cave, she understood one thing with absolute certainty. This was never just about her. She looked down at the documents in her hands, pages filled with names, transactions, secrets powerful enough to destroy lives. For decades, she had chased stories like this. Exposed corruption. Brought truth into the light. But this time, this wasn't just another story. This was her grandfather's unfinished war. I misjudged him, she whispered, almost to herself. Victor glanced at her. Most people did. Margaret shook her head slowly, emotion rising in her chest. All these years. I thought he walked away. That he chose distance over family. Her voice tightened. But he didn't run from us. He stayed away to protect us. The realization hit deeper than any headline she had ever written. Every birthday he missed. Every unanswered question. Every quiet resentment she carried. It had all been built on a lie. Or worse. A sacrifice she never understood. Victor's voice softened, just slightly. He knew what these people were capable of. If they connected him to his family, you wouldn't be standing here right now. Margaret closed her eyes for a brief moment. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking like a journalist. She was thinking like a granddaughter. And it changed everything. The cave no longer felt cold. It felt intentional. Every carved wall, every hidden corner, every detail carefully placed. This wasn't just a hiding place. It was a message. A legacy. He didn't leave this for the police, Margaret said, opening her eyes again. Or for the system. Victor studied her. No? She shook her head. He left it for someone he trusted. Her grip tightened on the papers. Someone who would understand what to do with it. A beat passed. Then Victor asked quietly, "And you think that's you?" Margaret met his gaze, steady, unshaken. "I know it is." Outside, doors slammed again. Voices echoed faintly through the desert air, drifting into the cave like a warning. Time was running out. But something inside Margaret had already shifted. Fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. In its place was purpose. For decades, she had told other people's stories. Now, she was living one. And more importantly, she was finishing one. "They think this is about money," she said. "About control." Victor nodded. "That's how they see the world." Margaret took a slow breath. "But they're wrong." She looked around the cave one more time, not as an outsider, not as someone passing through, but as someone who finally understood its meaning. "This isn't power," she continued. "It's truth." Her grandfather hadn't hidden here out of fear. He had endured. He had waited. He had built something that could outlast him. And now, it had reached her. Victor watched her carefully, as if reassessing everything he thought he knew. "You're not backing down," he said. It wasn't a question. Margaret gave a small, determined shake of her head. "No." Another sound echoed, closer this time. Footsteps approaching the cave entrance. Victor exhaled sharply. "Then you need to understand something." She turned to him. "This doesn't end clean," he said. "People like them. They don't lose gracefully." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "I've seen worse," she replied. But even as she said it, she knew this was different. Because now, she had something to lose. Not just her life, but his truth. Her grandfather's name. His sacrifice. And she wasn't going to let that disappear into darkness. "Then we do it right," she said firmly. "No shortcuts. No running." Victor studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right," he said. "Then we fight smart." Margaret adjusted her grip on the documents, her mind already shifting into strategy mode. Not just as a journalist. Not just as a granddaughter. But as someone who had finally chosen her side. Outside, shadows moved across the cave entrance. Voices grew louder. The past had caught up. But this time, it wasn't chasing her. She was ready to face it. The moment the voices reached the cave entrance, everything accelerated. Victor moved first. "Lights off," he whispered sharply. Margaret reacted instantly, switching off her flashlight. Darkness swallowed the chamber, thick and absolute. The only sound now was her breathing, and the distant crunch of boots on gravel. "They don't know the layout," Victor continued quietly. "That's our advantage." Margaret tightened her grip on the documents. For a split second, fear crept back in, but it didn't take over. Because now she understood something deeper. This wasn't just a threat. It was an opportunity. A dangerous one, but real. "They came too fast," she whispered. "That means they were already watching this place." Victor nodded in the dark. "Which means they're desperate." Margaret's mind clicked into place. Desperate people make mistakes. And for the first time since entering the cave, she saw a path forward, not just survival. But leverage. We don't run, she said. Victor turned toward her, surprised. You just decided that 10 minutes ago. I know, she replied. But now I know something else. She held up the documents, though neither of them could see them. This isn't just evidence, she said. It's insurance. A pause. Victor understood. If we play this right, she continued, they can't touch us. Outside, a voice echoed into the cave. Search the area. They're inside. Footsteps scattered. Time was gone. Victor leaned closer. Talk fast. Margaret's voice steadied. We don't fight them head on. We control the narrative. Victor frowned. Explain. I spent 40 years exposing people like this, she said. They don't fear guns. They don't fear threats. She took a breath. They fear exposure. Another voice outside. Closer now. Victor glanced toward the entrance. We don't have time for a press conference. We don't need one, Margaret replied. We just need proof. And a way to release it if something happens to us. That landed. Victor's tone shifted. A dead man's switch? Margaret nodded. Exactly. For the first time, Victor gave a faint, impressed exhale. Your grandfather would have liked you. That hit deeper than she expected. But there was no time to sit with it. Margaret moved quickly, scanning the cave walls again. If he built this place, she said, then there has to be more. Victor followed her line of thinking instantly. A secondary exit? Or a communication point, she added. Something he used to stay ahead. They moved together now, quiet, focused. Partners. Not strangers. Margaret ran her hands along the carved stone, feeling for anything unnatural. The craftsmanship was subtle, almost invisible, but now that she understood her grandfather's mindset, she wasn't just looking. She was thinking like him. If you were hiding from powerful people, she murmured, you wouldn't just hide. You'd plan for what happens after. Her fingers paused. A groove. Too smooth to be natural. Here. Victor joined her, pressing against the section of wall. For a moment, nothing. Then. A faint click. A hidden compartment slid open. Inside. Was something neither of them expected. A small, battery-powered radio transmitter. And beside it. A sealed envelope. Margaret's breath caught. He planned this, she whispered. Victor picked up the transmitter, inspecting it quickly. Still intact. Unbelievable. Margaret opened the envelope with careful hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A message. Short. Precise. If you found this, you're ready. Trust no one. Use the signal. They will come, but this time, you won't be alone. Margaret looked up, her eyes sharp now. This is it. Victor nodded slowly. Your opportunity. Outside, footsteps reached the inner tunnel. Flashlights flickered in the distance. They're coming, Victor said. Margaret didn't hesitate. Then we changed the game. She grabbed the transmitter. For years, she had told stories that exposed the truth. Now, she was about to become the story. And this time, she wasn't just uncovering the past. She was about to use it. The moment Margaret pressed the power switch on the transmitter, something inside her changed. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't hesitation. It was control. A soft hum filled the hidden compartment as the device came to life, its faint signal blinking in the darkness like a heartbeat returning after years of silence. Victor watched her closely. You sure about this? Margaret didn't look at him. I've never been more sure of anything. And that was the truth. Because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't reacting to a story. She was shaping it. Outside, the intruders were getting closer. Their voices echoed through the cave, louder now, more aggressive. She's in here, I saw the light. Spread out. Margaret inhaled slowly, grounding herself. For decades, she had walked into dangerous situations, but always with distance. Always with a notebook, a camera, a deadline. Now? There was no distance. No editor. No backup. Just her. And a legacy she refused to let die. She turned to Victor. How long until that signal gets picked up? If the receiver's still active. Minutes, he said. If not. He didn't finish. Margaret nodded. Then we make those minutes count. Another step forward. Another shift. She wasn't just the woman who uncovered truth anymore. She was the one protecting it. Listen to me, she said, her voice steady but firm. We don't hide like prey. We move like we belong here. Victor raised an eyebrow. That's a bold shift. Margaret allowed herself the faintest hint of a smile. I've spent my life walking into rooms where I didn't belong, she said. And I learned something. She met his eyes. If you act like you own the truth, people hesitate. Outside, a flashlight beam sliced into the chamber. Too close now. Victor lowered his voice. That hesitation won't last long. It doesn't have to, Margaret replied. She stepped forward, out of the shadows. Victor grabbed her arm instinctively. What are you doing? Changing the narrative. Before he could stop her, Margaret walked toward the approaching light. The men froze when they saw her. Not because she was armed. Not because she was dangerous. But because she wasn't afraid. Well, she said calmly, her voice echoing through the cave. You took your time. The leader, a tall man with sharp features and cold eyes, narrowed his gaze. You shouldn't be here, he said. Margaret tilted her head slightly. Interesting, she replied. Because legally. This is my property. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. Good. She stepped closer. Let me guess, she continued. You're here for the same thing my grandfather died protecting. Silence. A mistake on their part. Margaret saw it instantly. You do know what's in that box, she said. Which means you also know what happens if it goes public. The man's jaw tightened. Victor watched from the shadows, realization dawning. She wasn't confronting them. She was controlling them. You think you have leverage? The man said coldly. Margaret didn't blink. I know I do. She reached into her pocket, slowly, and pulled out a small device. Not a weapon. The transmitter. This signal? She said. It's already out. A lie. But a powerful one. Everything I found here is no longer just in my hands. The tension in the air shifted instantly. Doubt. Uncertainty. Exactly what she needed. Margaret took one more step forward. You can walk away, she said. Or you can stay, and find out how fast your entire operation collapses. The cave went silent. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. For a moment, no one moved. Then, the man gave a small, controlled nod. Let's go. Just like that. The men backed away, disappearing into the darkness they had come from. Their footsteps faded. Their presence gone. Margaret stood still, her pulse finally catching up with her. Behind her, Victor stepped out slowly. That, he said quietly, was not the same woman who walked into this cave. Margaret exhaled, her shoulders relaxing for the first time. No, she said. It wasn't. Because somewhere between fear and truth, she had become something else. Not just a storyteller. Not just a survivor. But a protector of something bigger than herself. She looked back at the cave, the walls, the hidden spaces, the legacy carved into stone. I think, she said softly, this is exactly who my grandfather needed me to become. And for the first time in years. Margaret Ellis felt like she had finally stepped into her purpose. The desert was quiet again. As if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Margaret stood at the mouth of inherited Grandpa's cave, watching the horizon stretch endlessly under the golden light of the setting sun. The same place that once felt empty now felt alive. Not because it had changed, but because she had. Victor stepped beside her, arms crossed, eyes scanning the distance where the vehicles had disappeared. "They'll be back," he said. Margaret nodded. "I know." But there was no fear in her voice. Only certainty. Because now, she was ready. Over the next few days, everything moved fast. Faster than Margaret expected. The signal her grandfather left behind, it worked. Not just as a call for help, but as a beacon. Within 48 hours, federal investigators arrived in Silver Ridge. Quietly at first. Unmarked vehicles. Questions asked behind closed doors. Then came the warrants. The searches. The arrests. Names from the documents, powerful names, began to surface. Businesses, officials, entire networks built on silence and control. And just like that, the story exploded. Margaret didn't write it. She didn't have to. For the first time in her life, the truth spoke for itself. Victor watched it unfold from a distance, shaking his head slightly. "Your grandfather waited decades for this." Margaret looked back at the cave. "He didn't wait," she said softly. "He prepared. And now, it was finished." A week later, the desert felt different. Lighter. Like something heavy had finally been lifted. Margaret stood inside the cave once more, but this time, it wasn't dark. Soft lights had been installed along the walls, illuminating the space her grandfather had carved with his own hands. The table was still there. The box. The documents, now carefully secured. But the feeling had changed. It was no longer a place of hiding. It was a place of truth. She walked slowly through the chamber, her fingers brushing against the stone walls. "You built all of this," she whispered. "Not just the cave. Not just the evidence. But the moment. The future. Her." At the center of the room, she paused. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel it fully. The loss. The years she never got back. The conversations that never happened. But also, the pride. The understanding. The connection that had somehow survived time, distance, and silence. "I get it now," she said quietly. And she meant it. Behind her, Victor leaned against the wall. "So what happens next?" he asked. Margaret turned to him. A small smile touched her lips. "Now?" she said. "We tell the rest of the story. Not through headlines. Not through breaking news. But through something deeper." She made a decision that day. One that surprised even her. She wasn't leaving. Not this time. Instead, she worked with the town, restoring the land, protecting the cave, and carefully opening part of it to the public. Not as a tourist attraction, but as a place of memory. A place where people could walk in and understand what one man had done to protect the truth. They named it quietly. Ellis Cavern. No grand opening. No media frenzy. Just a small sign at the entrance. And a story that lived inside the stone. Months later, Margaret sat on a wooden bench just outside the cave, a notebook resting on her lap. Not for an article. Not for a deadline. Just for herself. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the desert. She opened the notebook. And began to write. Not about corruption. Not about power. But about him. About sacrifice. About the things people never see. And as the words came, steady and honest, she realized something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. Victor approached quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one. "You finally look like someone who's done running," he said. Margaret smiled faintly. "I was never running," she replied. She looked out at the horizon one more time. "I was just trying to find the truth." She took a slow sip of coffee. "And now I know where it was all along." Not in the headlines. Not in the noise. But buried in silence. Waiting. For someone willing to listen. Margaret realized something simple but powerful inside inherited Grandpa's cave. Not all truths are loud, and not all love is visible. Her grandfather wasn't absent. He was protecting. Sometimes, the most meaningful things in life are hidden behind misunderstanding, silence, or time. What seems worthless today may carry a legacy you don't yet understand. The real lesson is this: look deeper. Don't judge too quickly. Because truth doesn't always disappear, it waits for the right person to uncover it. Think about something in your life you may have overlooked, a person, a memory, or a decision. Instead of dismissing it, take a closer look. Ask questions. Stay curious. You might discover meaning where you once saw nothing. Because sometimes, your greatest value doesn't come from what you gain, but from what you finally understand. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it.